Hello and welcome to Wisp Sports Radio's Transcending Sport, where we talk to women around the world who, after successful athletic careers, have become role models and thought leaders in their second career. I'm Chris Stafford, and my guest today is Switzerland's Tatjana Haenni, who is the former Deputy Director of the Competitions Division and the head of women's competition at FIFA, the international governing body for soccer. In that role, she led the organisational aspects of all FIFA Women's World Cups, including the recent Women's World Cup in Canada. Tatjana has dedicated her career to women's football and to advancing women in sport generally. She's also president of FC Zurich, a volunteer position that she's passionate about as she continues her work in the game. With many years' experience in sports leadership, Tatjana has a clear vision of how and why women's voices should be heard to increase representation in the boardrooms of sports administration at all levels. Tatjana, welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much for hosting me, and it's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, let's talk a little bit about, to start off with, where you are now in your career, having just left FIFA, and if you want to just explain a little bit of that situation and where you are at the moment.
Yeah, I have had a wonderful career within sports organizations like UEFA and FIFA, and I've been at FIFA for a long time, a couple of years. Unfortunately, I got released from my job a month ago. So the moment where I am right now is really interesting because I think I can look back at some wonderful years and experience in football, soccer. I had the privilege to work in something which is my passion, and I love coaching. I'm still involved with the club, so I feel like a privilege to be able to make my hobby and my passion my job. But now we will have to see, and I do think that there are challenges, but there are also opportunities, and it's a perfect time to maybe reorganize my life a little bit, look at other opportunities, look at where my passion will be my way for the future. But I sincerely hope that I can continue to contribute to women's football or women's in sports generally, because that's really where I do think so much more needs to be done. And I hope that I can stay involved and contribute to some changes for women in sports, in leadership positions, and for women's sports as a discipline as well.
Having been in sports administration for so long, Tatjana, and at the very top internationally, what did you most learn from your role as a woman in sports leadership in these very male-dominated environments?
I think one of my key lessons would still be that women are totally underrepresented in all those executive bodies, and that makes it really hard to influence the decision-making process. I think there's a general feeling that 30% of the decision makers or any group should be women. In my specific case, where women are underrepresented. But to achieve this really successful, diverse group, it's just not helpful if there's only one woman. And I really think in soccer, you also have to make a difference between women in leadership positions, which might be a CEO, a woman, or a president, or a female director of the marketing part. Or is it a woman being in charge of the women's sports discipline, in my case, women's football? And I really think these are two elements you need to look at separately. So generally speaking, there's a total need for women in decision-making bodies, but there's also a total need for a more strategic approach at the women's sports side, which in most sports disciplines is underrepresented in terms of media coverage, in terms of maybe prize money, in terms of number of competitions. And usually the highest growth potential in those sports disciplines is within the women and the girls. And I do think there needs to be some more strategic approach, basically in most of the sports in the world, to close that gap and give more opportunities to women and girls to be involved in the sport.
We've seen a shift, a little change in the culture and the opportunities for women, and I think of other sports like wrestling, like triathlon, equestrian. There's a number of sports at international federations and national governing bodies where women are taking more leadership roles. But it, as you pointed out there, Tatjana, it does mean that there has to be a shift in the culture and approach by the men who are dominating the power roles in those sports. How do you see that shifting, and what do you think would affect change in a most constructive and progressive way, not just stop, start, stop, start?
Yeah, I think in favor of this topic is just the cultural and the social changes are happening all over the world. And I also think it's important to note that not every country, not every region is on the same level, whereas in maybe North America or in Europe, some countries are actually well developed when it comes to women leadership or positions or women's sports. And we complain in our areas. There are areas in the world where they really have way more struggles and issues and problems. So I think on a worldwide level, there's a huge gap also for the same topic, and we have to make sure we don't forget some of the lower developed countries to support them as well. But I think really, bottom line, the time will help, and to push that forward and make it happening way faster. I just do think we need to work on the professional side of the sport, and we have to make sure that the key sports like golf, like football, soccer. I think there are different sports which are the most prominent ones in different regions, but the ones who can attract a big interest from public and media, we have to make sure, or the people in charge and the organizations in charge have to make sure they drive the professional area forward, because with this you get automatically all the elements you need to then further support other sports or other areas. So I hope there is a huge trend towards the professionalization of women's sports.
And you mentioned there, the leading countries, Tatjana, that bring forward and produce these women who do go on to international leadership roles in sport. Do you think there needs to be more focus on the smaller countries, or the medium, the other lesser powerful groups, if you will, now, not just in football, but I think in other sports as well, where those organizations need to put their women forward. They need to give them local, regional club. It has to start there, right? And they have to see that there is a career progression all the way up to international level opportunities.
Yeah, I totally agree with that comment. I do think it has to be a bottom up and a top down approach. I believe the top down approach helps you getting quicker results, because if you show the world and the public that the women's sport is interesting, is professional, attracts sponsors, spectators, family and parents are more at ease to let their girls to practice that sport. You become role models, you have social media heroes. So I do think that top-down approach does help to overcome all the challenges and obstacles you may have. And if one country is strong, the neighboring countries make the same person or people or sport, and they get attracted as well. But at the same time, I totally agree with you, through statutory obligation or government regulations or just decisions by the top management and the top executives, there has to be a focus on women and girls, because I do think a lot of which are being done today are just a drop on a hot stone, and the key decisions are not made. And the key decisions would be really simple. You need a certain number of women in your boards. You need a clear strategy and a vision for the women's boards. Where do you want to go? How you get there? And you need a fair and adequate allocation of resources for those sports sections. Is it human and financial? And if these things are not in place, then to me that just shows that you're not really taking it seriously.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've seen, when you're in meeting situations, decision-making environments there at the highest level, Tatjana, that what women bring to that meeting, and that men should really open their eyes to see what women bring, that it is a different perspective for cultural reasons, for gender reasons, whatever it may be, but there is a very different perspective often to a situation. When women hit a glass ceiling, the message that this sends, that men are not listening, that sends that message to young girls who think, oh, I want to be like Tatjana, I want to get really good at my sport and have a good career, and then go on into sports leadership. Talk a little bit about that, if you would, and why you think that's important that men understand that.
For me, this is a hard one because I really struggle a little bit to understand the challenges. I mean, we're in 2017 and we have had so many now in business, older and younger people. We know the history, we know the past, we know the challenges, especially when it comes to the role of women in society. And we all know where we come from, and we all have mothers and sisters and daughters, and it's just really hard to understand why such a long time to make it change happen. I'm just a big fan of diversity, so I would really love to see groups of men and women of all regions and colors and ages as well, and from different areas of expertise, because really a sport is such a professional environment nowadays, most sports, and you just need to have all the expertise in your group to make really the best out of it. Said before, there's a huge professional part where you talk about money and contracts and legal stuff, but there's also this huge basis of just grassroots. And I mean, most of the athletes are performing on the grassroots level. I know in soccer there's it's not so easy to really say, but let's take an average. 5% of the soccer players in the world are professional players, and the rest is just amateurs and kids and moms and dads and coaches who have just fun and are involved in football. And for them, I really think it would be so important to have the proper structures in place and just treat everybody with respect and in a fair manner, and make sure everybody has the same opportunities. So why we have so many challenges, I'm really not sure. I could only tell you if once I would be really involved in a high decision-making level, and I would be able to explain you the issues or the challenges, which I'm not. I just know from my personal opinion, and that I struggle to understand that we're still fighting so much for gender equality.
Yeah, it is an ongoing problem for sure, and one that needs to be, constantly kept first and foremost. And I'm curious, Tatjana, when we look at so many athletes coming into sports administration, they look for other opportunities after their professional athletic career, and we know, how busy that is at professional level for them. It's hard for them to be doing something else to prepare for their second career. But what would you say to them now, if they're still in their sport, to think about if they want to get into sports administration and sports leadership and take up these roles? What skills do they need? What did you bring when you started your second career?
Yeah, I think what we can see in women's football also is that there are more and more professional clubs and associations who really hire specialists as a coach, as a goalkeeper coach, as a a scientist in many different areas, as well as a team administrator or a media officer for the team. So the good news is there's a really a way higher number of job opportunities now in football, and I'm sure in other women's sports as well, for administrators or technicians and coaches, which is already a good sign, because a couple of years ago it was really hard because it was all on a voluntary basis, and female athletes who have given so much for their career came to a point where they wanted to focus not on their active sports career, but they wanted to focus on their professional career or on family and maybe more time, private time. So they kind of left the sport just because there was no way for them. There was no guided roads. There was no opportunity. And they took it and accepted it and made sure they find their way in another area. What I would tell everybody is that women need to speak up a bit more, because it's really the time right. Everybody knows it. Culture, it's clear. We need more women in leadership positions. We need more women support. We need more support for women's sports. And it's still a lip service in many areas, but I do think that women and athletes need to be stronger together and speak up for their interests and show discrepancies and go to the right people and go to their decision makers and just highlight everything they would like to talk about, including what's my next step, where can I go, what kind of career opportunities do I have. And in this respect, I do think that women are quite often a bit too shy and not fighting enough for themselves and not standing up clearly and saying that's what I want and that's why I think I'm the right one. So when you ask me about my career, I do think that this might be one of the reasons I was very clear that I would like to be involved in football and in women's football. And when I got opportunities to be involved in other areas, I just refused because that was not my passion. So I stick to my passion, and I tried to be involved, and I tried to do everything I could to have an opportunity, including voluntary work. I run a club in Zurich. It's one of the best clubs in Switzerland. We have some players on the national team, and I run it since almost 20 years as a voluntary president. And I do think you also have to give something back to the sport on a maybe voluntary basis to show that you're able to do it and you can do it, and then speak up and ask for what you want and make sure people listen to you, and you get all your network involved. And at one point, I think there's no more opportunity that the federations and decision makers have no more chance to say, no, you're not good enough. Because as I said before, there's so many new opportunities in women's football for professional careers outside the field. And interestingly, there is a high percentage of men taking over those roles. If you look at the coaches for women's national teams or women's club teams or team administrators, team media officers, there's a lot of men. And I do think that's good. We need men in women's football as well. But there has to be a chance for former players, and not just women in football, but former football players to stay involved and help growing the game, because they know what's good for the game.
Yes, for sure. And I think you'll have seen the growth of the women's game, of course. Now it's a game which is so skilled, they're so professional, and the leading nations, really, it's as much entertaining. As you say, the sport has come a long way, and the attitude within the sport for women now to see that opportunity in professional sport that can transcend the game for them to new opportunities. Having the experience that you have, Tatjana, where do you want to carry forward that experience then to a wider audience? As you said, you're interested in gender issues, inequality, diversity, and all of those things that football has helped you as a vehicle to have a voice.
Yeah, I think for all those topics, there's a lot of good organizations out there. There's a lot of people doing good things. There's also some associations doing a lot of good work. And I just would hope that maybe my future will be in some sort of role to regroup all these elements, because I do think that we would be stronger together instead of 20 different organizations doing something. And there's really a lot of good stuff out there. But I do think one of the objectives might be to get everybody on the same page, who fights for the same things, who has the same objectives, who wants to point out the same things, because we all talk the same. It's really getting more women in decision-making positions and getting more support for the women's sports, and equal media coverage, equal prize money where it makes sense. Maybe not always equal, but in many cases, it's just really not explainable, the differences you see. So there has to be a way forward to make a change happen. And if I can be involved in some sort of a new organization, or regrouping the existing organizations, making sure there's a good network, a good communication flow, and then take the right decisions and try to move the right stones to get some results, that would be something which I'm totally interested, because still my passion is women's sports and the role of women in sport. And we will see where that will bring me or my future. If it's not me, then there's so many good other groups and people out there who I try, or I hope they will continue that path. If I can play a role in it, then that would be wonderful.
What are you most looking forward to now at this stage in your career then? What excites you? What gets you out of bed and think that, with your can-do attitude, what does Tatjana say to herself every day?
What I say to me is that this path is not over. It doesn't matter if it's football or ice hockey or any other sport. I do think in most sports there is injustice or inequalities for women and girls, and as long as I know this is true, and in some regions it's really bad. I mean, if I want to complain for Europe, then you haven't seen South America with all the cultural issues, or Africa with harassment and girls who have basically to stop any sports activities as of 18 or so, because they have to have their family and be mums and look for the family and can't just do sport. So there's so many things which are still something. I do think we have to look at this and we have to try to make a change happen. And for whatever reason, this is my passion, and I can't really think that I can stop trying to influence any of these elements until there's some sort of equality in the world for women's sports and women in sport.
So finally, what do you most value about being involved in sport, Tatjana?
Oh, it's everything it has given to me. I'm so privileged that I have made friends for life. I've seen the world. I have an understanding for different cultures. I think it opens your eyes and makes you appreciate what you have. It shows you that there's so much to give back and help others. I really think the person I am is basically because I had the chance to learn all these things through football, and I think all sports can give that to people and to humans. And I do think this is something which you cannot learn or buy in any other school, but it's a wonderful tool, and we have to make sure sports, all sports, stay clean, they are fair, are with respect, and it's really a life school for kids. And that's something which is a wonderful experience.
Well, Tatjana, I'm sure there's so much more that you're going to offer the world of women's sports, and we look forward to it. And I want to wish you the very, very best of luck with your career. And thank you so much for taking the time to come on the programme.
That was a big pleasure, and I thank you very much for everything you do.
And for more conversations from the world of women's sports, including hundreds more podcasts, videos, blogs and articles, please visit us at wispsports.com, and you can join in the conversation by following us on social media at wispsports. Until the next time, thank you for listening.